Good morning, friends. Welcome back to Acre Homestead. Today we are going to be prepping for Thanksgiving. We are celebrating with Josh's family tomorrow, and I'm responsible for making two desserts. We're going to make a pumpkin cheesecake, a cranberry upside down cake, which I've never made before, and I think that's going to be delicious. We are also going to make stuffing and mashed potatoes and a cranberry salsa for an appetizer. So two desserts, two side dishes, and one appetizer, all from scratch. And all of these things we can do the day before to enjoy the day, and it can be a lot less stressful the day of our holiday because we are celebrating tomorrow. It is an extremely windy and rainy day. It is raining cats and dogs out there. So I just want to create a nice cozy environment for us to hang out in the kitchen all day. So I'm going to go ahead and pour myself a cup of tea. And this is my cup that stays hot. It's a battery-powered mug, so we can have some hot tea throughout this entire day today. So let's go ahead and get started on the pumpkin cheesecake first, because that needs to bake in the oven and we're going to have that chill. We are going to start by making the graham cracker crust for the pumpkin cheesecake. Yesterday, to prep for today, I made 2 loaves of my no-knead bread. I diced them up, I let them sit in the oven overnight to get nice and stale. And we are going to use these to make our stuffing. You have seen me make my no-knead bread many times, so I figured I would just go ahead and make it up and make some croutons so that we can make some stuffing from scratch, and that was so easy. But to bake our pumpkin cheesecake, we need to preheat the oven to 350 degrees. And the last thing I would want to do is turn that oven on and burn those crumbs before we even are able to make our stuffing. So for our graham cracker crust, we're going to put 12 graham crackers in our food processor. You could buy the pre-ground graham crackers, but I just bought the whole ones this time. To this mixture, I added 6 tablespoons of melted butter, 1 tablespoon of sugar, and a ½ teaspoon of cinnamon. This is our springform pan. This is what we're going to make the cheesecake in. So I'm going to take our crust, our butter, sugar, graham cracker mixture, and we're going to put that in the bottom of our springform pan. The crust is my favorite part always of a cheesecake, and I love pumpkin cheesecake. It's my favorite kind of cheesecake. So I'm going to take the back of my measuring spoon, and I'm going to use that to push our graham cracker crust up a little bit and smooth it down on the bottom of the pan. You don't have to put a lip on the side like I'm doing right here, but I'm choosing to do that. Some cheesecakes have it, some don't. Mine's not going to go all the way up the side. In a matter of minutes, we're already making progress today. So we have our crust. I'm going to stick this in the oven, and we're going to cook that for 8 minutes. While that's cooking, we are going to get going on the filling of the cheesecake. Yesterday, I did a few things to make my life easier today, knowing that we were going to spend some time in the kitchen together. I went grocery shopping downstairs and brought up onions and potatoes that we're going to use today. We made the bread, and then I also took my cream cheese and butter out of the refrigerator so that they could get to room temperature. I grabbed some broth, and then we might do a bonus and make some macaroni and cheese, but I don't know. We might not. We'll see how far we get today. So I brought up some macaroni noodles, but for the pumpkin cheesecake filling, we're going to make it in the mixer. You know what I didn't do yesterday to make my life easier? I say all of that, and then I forgot to get my pumpkin out of... Oh, shoot. I didn't get my pumpkin pod. So what I'm going to do instead of making the pumpkin filling, I'm going to get this thawing, is we will go ahead and make our raspberry upside down cake. For the cranberry upside down cake, we need to make a caramel sauce that's going to go on the bottom of the cake that when we flip it over, it's going to eventually become the top. So we need to start with 4 tablespoons of butter in a saucepan, and then we're going to add to that 3/4 a cup of packed brown sugar. We're going to let that cook, and while that's cooking, we are supposed to heavily butter the bottom of a 9-inch cake pan that has 2-inch sides. And it said to liberally butter this cake pan. I'm just using the butter wrapper. We're basically making a caramel sauce here, so we need the butter to melt and the sugar to melt, and we need this to boil for 15 seconds. Our caramel sauce boiled for 15 seconds, so we're going to transfer it to our prepared baking dish. Now we're going to add our cranberries, and we're going to add 1 layer thick of cranberries onto the bottom of our cake pan. If cranberries don't scream the holidays, I don't know what does. Well, maybe pumpkin, because we're going to be doing pumpkin today too. But for the cake batter, which is what we're going to make now, we need to add 8 tablespoons of butter to our mixer. That's room temperature butter. And then to that, we are going to add 1 1/2 cups of granulated sugar. And we're going to beat this together until it becomes light and fluffy. Our sugar looks perfect. So to this, we're going to add 3 large eggs. This cake is really easy to put together. Once we have all of those wet ingredients in there, we're going to add a few more dry ingredients. We need 1 3/4 cup of flour. It said to do this in a separate bowl and then add it alternating between the flour and the milk and the yogurt that we're going to add in just a minute. But I'm going to go ahead and just do it out of order, and that'll be okay. To our flour, we're going to add 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of ginger, a pinch of clove, and 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. We're going to mix those ingredients together. The last 2 ingredients are 1/4 cup of milk. I have whole milk. It doesn't say what type of milk. And then 1/2 cup of Greek yogurt. So I'm going to go ahead and scrape down the sides of the bowl just so that we have everything mixed in really, really well. And I'm going to mix that one more time. I did take out our pumpkin cheesecake crust out of the oven. It's nice and golden brown now. I think our cake batter is done. That was so easy. That kind of reminds me of making kind of like a, what's the word I'm looking for? A bundt cake, where you just kind of mix everything together and throw it in a pan. Because we're not going to have to frost this cake or anything, because it's going to be beautifully decorated from our caramel and our cranberries. This recipe called for 1 tablespoon of orange zest. I decided to make this yesterday, and I don't have any oranges, so we're going to skip that step, and I think it's going to be just fine. This needs to bake at 325 degrees. So it said as soon as you put the cake in the oven, you want to turn the temperature down to 325. I had the oven preheated to 350. Now it's going to cool down to 325, and it needs to take 55 to 60 minutes to bake. I think our pumpkin is ready. So we should be able to, we should be able to make our pumpkin cheesecake now. So I'm going to use the same mixer and paddle for our pumpkin cheesecake because it has a lot of the same ingredients. No need to go ahead and clean it between the 2 recipes. I have my other oven preheated to 350 degrees, and we'll use that oven to bake the cheesecake. So the first ingredient for our pumpkin cheesecake is cream cheese, and we need 3 8-ounce packages of just your regular cream cheese. One thing I have noticed that has gone up a ton right now during all this crazy inflation is cream cheese has gotten so expensive. It's kind of surprised me. It kind of seems kind of like a random thing to go, I guess everything's going up in price. Eggs are really expensive too right now. I way prefer cheesecake, pumpkin cheesecake over pumpkin pie. So I almost always volunteer to make a pumpkin cheesecake for the holidays just so that I can enjoy it. My sister at Christmas, or maybe it's this Thanksgiving, she's gonna make a pumpkin cheesecake, but it's gonna be like a hybrid between pumpkin cheesecake and pecan pie, which that sounds really good as well. So I might have to get the recipe from her for that because I love pecan pie too. All right, we have our 3 blocks of cream cheese in there. To the cream cheese, we're gonna add 1.5 cups of brown sugar. I'm gonna get this creaming together before I add anything else. 1/4 cup of sour cream. 2 teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice, vanilla. Now we need to measure out our pumpkin. I put 2 cups in that Ziploc bag. And when I Googled how much pumpkin is in a 15-ounce can of pumpkin, the measurement is 2 cups and 1/2 tablespoon. So as long as I have close to 2 cups, I am happy with this. Yeah, that's almost exactly perfectly 2 cups. So I did, maybe it's exactly 2 cups and 1/2 tablespoon. I like this recipe because it uses an entire can of pumpkin. So if you're one of those people and you love pumpkin flavored things, but you hate when a recipe calls for using like 1/3 of a can of pumpkin or 1/2 a can of a pumpkin and you're never quite sure what to do with the rest of it, you don't have to worry about it with this recipe. So we're gonna mix this up, and that's how easy it is to make cream cheese. You just throw everything into your mixer, mix it up, and then we're gonna pour it into our crust. One of the nice things about making pumpkin cheesecake, or any cheesecake for a party for that matter, is that it's best if it cools overnight. It tastes a lot better. You know what? I think that my springform pan is too little to fit all this cream cheese mixture, so I'm gonna bake this separately. And I'm actually gonna take a little bit of this out because otherwise our cheesecake is gonna be way too full. I should have looked at what size springform pan we were supposed to use. So I'm gonna take this and we're gonna put our cheesecake into the oven. And that needs to bake for an hour, and then we're gonna turn the oven off and I'll show you what we do after that. Now I have so much cream cheese mixture. Let me reread this recipe. I've never made this particular recipe before, and that's crazy that there's that much filling left over. I just took this ruler and measured my springform pan. The recipe calls for a 9-inch springform pan with 3-inch sides. My springform pan is 8 inches with 2.5-inch sides. So that is why I have almost half of my pumpkin cheesecake filling mixture, I guess, because I just did not have big enough of a pan. I don't want to waste all of this beautiful cheesecake mixture, but I only have 1 springform pan. Yes, so what I'm going to do is put this in here, and when my cheesecake is done, I probably will end up baking 1 more cheesecake, or what I might do, you know what I'm going to do with this? I am going to make Josh some of the best pumpkin bake cheesecake oatmeal this week. So last week he had peach strawberry baked oatmeal, and I'm not gonna waste this. I'm gonna turn this into a delicious pumpkin cheesecake oatmeal. So we're gonna put that in the fridge and save it, and in a couple days I will use it for that. So now we have both of our desserts going. We have our cheesecake and our cranberry upside down cake. So now what I'm gonna do is kind of tidy up my mess a little bit here, and then we're gonna get going on some of the savory dishes. We have the mashed potatoes we still need to make and the stuffing. You all know one thing I like to do, if at all possible, if I'm gonna spend some time in the kitchen in the morning to make the day go a little bit smoother, is to unload the dishwasher. And that was something that I was able to do today. So it just makes my life a lot easier. And especially when I'm doing a cooking day today where I have 2 desserts that I can cook first, put those in the oven, and then I can kind of switch gears and cook the 2 other dishes that are going to be more on the stovetop. I can have my baked goods passively cooking for me while I then move on to the next project. So these eggs shells that I cracked. I am going to save these for my chickens. I'm going to put those in there. And I like to clean as I go if I can. Does that always happen? No, but it does make, at the end of the day or the end of the cooking session, that much more enjoyable when you don't have a massive, massive mess on your hands. We are going to need the food processor again, so I'm not going to put this away. We're going to make our appetizer in the food processor. And we're going to use these cranberries to do that. So now that we have a nice kind of reset on the kitchen, I can see the counters, everything's clear, we're back to kind of base level. We're gonna get going on our savory side dishes. In this bag, I went downstairs yesterday actually, and I grilled potatoes, garlic, and onions. And we need those for our stuffing and our mashed potatoes. I also am gonna need celery, and this is the celery that we grew in the garden together. I've been keeping it fresh in the refrigerator since we harvested it. There's a couple in here that need to find their way to the compost bin, but most of them are still really nice. We are going to need to get a little bit more celery out of the freezer, so we'll use the fresh stuff plus some of the stuff that we preserved up for our stuffing. Or I guess technically we're making dressing because we're not stuffing the turkey. We always make dressing because we're going to bake this in the oven. And we're going to base this recipe off my grandma's recipe, which is a very traditional stuffing recipe. It has sausage in it, and that's my favorite way to make stuffing. I've had the stuffings that are like the fancy stuffings that have apples and maybe dried cranberries or craisins, pecans, and those are good, but I always just want, when it comes to Thanksgiving, just a traditional sausage, onions, celery, sage profile. I think there could be a time and place for the extra additives, but for me, just your plain old stuffing. Sometimes in my cooking, you know, I like to get really creative and try a bunch of new things, but some of those holiday staples, I like to just keep them nice and traditional. Do you guys stuff your bird when it comes to the stuffing, or do you do it and make the dressing where you cook it outside the bird? I don't know if I think actually when we were growing up, when my grandma, my dad's mom, would make Thanksgiving, I think she would stuff the bird, but we haven't done that in years and years and years. And I can see out of the corner of my eye, because I turned my oven light on, that our cake, our cranberry cake, it looks like we need to check on it. I turned the light on so that I would keep an eye on it and I could see it. No, that's not done. I'm gonna turn the light on over here too. That didn't work. I can't figure out how to turn that oven light on, but the cheesecake is nowhere near being done. I think I'm gonna go ahead and put a piece of foil over that cake because the outside is getting really done and it's not done on the inside. I'm kind of thinking that oven maybe runs really warm because we kind of had that problem when we made the banana cake together, is that the outside part cooked a whole lot faster than the inside. And I don't want to overcook that cake. Let me go get a piece of foil. I grabbed some celery out of the freezer too. Yeah, that's not done yet. One exciting thing that I was able to do yesterday, between the crazy amount of rain we've been having, is I was able to get out there and plant garlic, which I am so grateful I finally got out there and was able to plant it, because we are coming up on it being a little bit late to plant garlic. And reason I hadn't planted any garlic was because I wasn't sure where to put it. We are starting to make progress on the garden plans for next year, And because I didn't know where our garden was going to go, I was worried about putting the garlic somewhere that we were then going to dig up or move before we would be able to harvest it. But now that I know where the garden's going for 2023, I was able to find a really good place to plant the garlic, and I will show you guys where we planted it and what we planted, because I think I'm going to be able to grow enough for another year's worth. That was the thing I was like, I don't know. Oh, what am I doing? I'm going to take some of this butter out. I'm glad we have a little bit of butter in there, but we don't need that much butter. But I was thinking I wasn't going to be able to probably grow a year's worth of garlic this year, but it's all working out, and I think that we are going to be able to. So that's super encouraging to have that in the ground now. So now what I'm doing is we're going to start on browning our sausage. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think I should have browned 2 pounds of sausage, but I only thawed 1. Let me re-look up the recipe. Just looked up the recipe and we're good. 1 pound of sausage is exactly what we needed. You can see this is my heated cup. It's still steaming from this morning. I've not microwaved it. This cup is a battery-powered warming cup. It is fantastic. Josh got this cup for me for my birthday last year, and it's been a game changer for me. All right, so we're gonna let this brown, and I'm gonna go ahead and open up this thing of celery. I think while this is browning, we can go ahead and wash up our potatoes. When I harvest my potatoes, I do not wash them because the moisture on them could have them burn. So when we go to cook them, that's when we wash them. I have noticed that some of them are starting to grow eyes. So I went through and I tried to go through the potatoes and grab the ones that were growing eyes so that we make sure we use those ones first. And if you aren't going to use them and they have eyes on them, you want to knock the eyes off them. I'm going to make a lot of potatoes so that we have leftovers. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, we're celebrating Thanksgiving early with Josh's family because all of his siblings are going to be in town, and we want to make sure that we are able to celebrate together when everybody's available. On my side of the family and Josh's side of the family, we are always looking at making sure we can be together. These are some potatoes that I found when I was planting garlic. They were just some volunteer potatoes from the previous owner, so I'm going to wash these up too, and we're going to use these. Now we are going to leave the skins on these, so I'm going to scrub them really, really well using one of these natural fiber scrubbers. And then once they're scrubbed and clean, I'll go ahead and just plop them in the pot we're going to cook our potatoes in. I probably will have to cut some of these in half because they are a little bit big and I want everything to cook at the same rate. Two more minutes on that and then I think our cake is perfect. We're getting some really nice color on the sausage. I have this really pretty white serving plate. This was actually a gift in my P.O. box, and I really treasure this serving plate. I think it's beautiful. So we are going to plate up our cranberry cake on that, but we need to get it out of the oven first. I think we're perfect. It said when you push on it and it springs back, it's done. So that looks beautiful. We're gonna let this cool for 10 minutes before we flip it over. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn this oven off because we're done using it. I'm gonna put that piece of foil back in there so I can reuse that next time. So I'm gonna break up this sausage just a little bit because it doesn't need to be in big chunks. And we're gonna add some butter, and we're not gonna drain the grease. This is not a healthy dish. This is all about Thanksgiving. We want that sausage flavor and the butter flavor together. Now we're going to add our onions. We're going to wait to add our garlic once the onions and celery cooks down, but I'll go ahead and add some salt and a good amount of pepper.
Now that we have the stuffing going, we're going to come back to the potatoes, and I am going to take a paring knife and just cut off any blemishy spots or anything that I see and cut the potatoes down so that they're all going to cook at the same rate.
I think we're going to attempt to go ahead and flip out, oh, that's hot still. Flip out this cake. Maybe, let me give it a few more minutes. Well, no, I think we can do it. It did say to take, yeah, that's not sticking at all. That's perfect. Let's see. I do need to get a pot holder. Oh my goodness. Look how beautiful that is. That is stunning. So we're gonna let this completely cool, and then I think we'll probably, I don't know if I'll store it in the fridge or on the counter, but we will need to cover it, but it's way too warm to cover it now. That thing is beautiful. I don't know if we're gonna cover it with some whipped cream, powdered sugar, or what, but we are gonna decorate that, and that is so pretty. Yay, first thing done. I'm still washing those potatoes, but I wanted to give this a look, and this is cooking up beautifully. It smells, oh my goodness, so good. This smells like Thanksgiving. The sausage, onions, and celery. Yum. I got all the potatoes washed up, but I think I need to put them in a bigger pot. So we're gonna put them in here, and then we'll fill this up with just room temperature water. Now our celery and onions are really soft. Our sausage is nicely browned. We're gonna go ahead and add the garlic. We're gonna let this saute for a couple minutes. While this is sauteing, I'm gonna add some parsley. This is freeze-dried parsley. Just gonna break it up with my hands a little bit. My grandma, when she makes her stuffing, she uses one of those stuffing packets you buy with the croutons, where they're already made and it comes with a seasoning pack. Well, I made my own bread, so I don't have that seasoning pack. That's why we're gonna add the seasonings to this. So we added parsley, and I don't have any poultry seasoning in my house, and poultry seasoning is just the main flavor, and that is sage, thyme, and rosemary. So we're gonna add a little bit of all three of those in here. Very little rosemary. I don't want that to be too strong at all, but I am going to kind of crush it up with my hands. This is some rosemary from the garden, and then we have some thyme. Oh, it smells so good, so a little bit of that as well. I know I have sage down here somewhere. I cannot find my sage, which is really weird, but I know that there is sage out in this garden out here. So we can take, you want to see how blustery it is? It is very wet, very blustery, super foggy, but over here, so I just rinsed off this sage, so we'll just dice this up or chop it up nice and fine. Sage, rosemary, and thyme can be very strong flavors. So I like to start out with a little bit less, and then we can always add more. So I think our pumpkin cheesecake is perfect. It's nice and firm. So what I'm going to do now is turn the oven off, and we're going to let it cool in the oven like that with the door slightly open. By letting it cool with the door slightly open, what that does is it helps prevent the cracking on the top. I get cracking on my cheesecakes all the time and they still taste fine, but I think that's why you want it to cool with the door slightly open. So now that we have that done, let's go ahead and we can actually put our stuffing together. So to put our stuffing together, I've got a big mixing bowl. We're gonna add all of our breadcrumbs. Now we're gonna add our sausage mixture. Mix this together. That's why it's okay to have that butter, because it's going to absorb, the croutons are going to absorb all that delicious flavor. I am going to scrape out all of that onion mixture. I don't want any of that not to end up in our final stuffing. I have some chicken broth and turkey broth here. Stuffing is one of those things you don't really know how much broth you're gonna need till you kind of have it mixed together. And because this is going to be sitting overnight, we may need to add more broth tomorrow. We'll start with 3 cups. I'm gonna go ahead and add all of that. There's some liquid at the bottom, so I'm gonna try to stir that in until there's no liquid at the bottom. It's gonna take a minute for these croutons to reabsorb that moisture. Now I do wanna taste this because I need to taste it to see if it needs any seasoning, salt, pepper, if we have the right amount of herbs in here. And this is a good time to adjust the seasonings if you need to. Because I'm using homemade broth, my broth is not super salty, so it does need some more salt. I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of salt, I'm going to mix it up, and pepper, and then I'm going to stir it, and then I'm going to sprinkle a little bit more. Just because stuffing is kind of one of those things that it's kind of hard to season all the way through. And I don't know if you could hear, but when I was chewing on that piece of bread, it was crunchy on the inside. So we will need more broth, but this is one of those things that stuffing, you want to make sure you put enough moisture in, but you can always add more broth right before you cook it. And so when I go over to Josh's, because we're going to celebrate at Josh's mom's house tomorrow, I'll bring some broth, so if we need to put some more on before we bake it, we can. Let me taste that before I add more salt. Okay. We don't need any more salt. That is so good. That is perfect. I'm glad I tasted it before I added more salt. It's so important to taste your food as you cook. Oh yeah, that's perfect. So good. There is definitely a little crunch to that bread, but I don't think I want to add it now because as this sits in the refrigerator, it's going to continue to absorb that moisture. But I'm going to bring this jar of broth to Josh's mom's house tomorrow. This is the dish we're going to serve our stuffing in. Just a casserole dish. You know what I forgot to add to this? I just realized is an egg. I was supposed to add 1 egg to this mixture, and I forgot. I think it's gonna be okay. Do you think I should add the egg? I think it's gonna be okay. I don't think we need to add the egg. That is perfect. That looks so beautiful. So beautiful. The thing about Thanksgiving is almost all of your dishes you can prep ahead of time to make your life a lot easier. So on the day of the celebration, you just pop everything in the oven and warm it up, and then you've got a beautiful 8, 6, 10 course meal, whatever it ends up being. If I'm not this cool, I'll put a piece of foil on it and I'll stick it in the fridge. So we need to check on our potatoes, and we also need to make our appetizer that we're gonna make. And the nice thing about this appetizer is it is better too if you make it the day before. I just washed up all the ingredients for the cranberry salsa appetizer, and I went and I just rinsed out my food processor because we're gonna make this appetizer in the food processor. It makes it so easy. I might make some cranberry sauce today. I know that I made enough and canned it last year, but you can see there's no marking on what this is, and so I'm not sure if I can find it. Wow, did you hear that ping? Oh yeah, this is cranberry sauce. So I don't have to make cranberry sauce. So the rest of these cranberries that I didn't use between the cake and the salsa, I just threw in the freezer whole. Cranberries freeze beautifully. I'm gonna put this in the fridge now, and I'll bring this cranberry sauce to Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow, and I don't have to worry about making it, which is awesome. So here I have 1 jalapeno. I'm just gonna dice it up just a little bit. I'm gonna keep the seeds in it for a little bit of heat. I have 1 bunch of green onions. When I washed these green onions, I did take out the outermost skin just so that we have nice, clean, fresh green onions. And I'm gonna chop these into just like 1-inch rough chops. And I am gonna chop up just a little bit of the greens too, so we'll use the whites and the greens. Now what we're gonna do, this is one of the easiest appetizers. Your family's gonna love it. I thought it was a little bit strange at first, but trust me, it is delicious. We're going to put our cranberries in the food processor, and you do not want to turn this on and just have it go crazy. You want to pulse it. Until you get it to your desired texture. So we pulsed it until it was about that texture, which is perfect. I'm going to put our cranberries in the dish we're going to put in the refrigerator until we're ready to serve it, because we need to use this food processor again. I like to process the vegetables separately so that we don't over chop the cranberries, because they all kind of take a different amount of chopping in the food processor. Now we're going to take our green onions and our jalapeno. I think I'm going to put 1 more jalapeno in there. You do add a lot of sugar to this, so a little bit of heat is kind of a nice contrast. So I'm going to leave the skins and seeds and ribs in. Perfect. This is a perfect dish or appetizer for Christmas too, because the red and the green are just so beautiful together. So we're going to put our jalapeno and our green onion in with our cranberries. I forgot to buy limes, so I'm going to put the juice of what would be the equivalent of about 2 limes in here, but this is lemon juice. That'll work just fine, and then we're going to add some salt. And lastly, which you cannot skip this step, I on accident forgot 1 here, and it was awful. You can add anywhere from 3/4 a cup to 1 cup of sugar. So I started out, that was probably about a cup. Normally I start out with the 3/4 cup and then I go from there, but that's okay. Cranberries are so tart that it really needs that balance of sugar in order for this to taste balanced and delicious. So all we do now is we stir in that sugar, the lime. Oh, we forgot 1 more thing. Cilantro. This is what makes it taste like a salsa, and it's so good. So this is freeze-dried cilantro. I'm gonna add a good handful. I love freeze-drying my cilantro because, oh my goodness, it just keeps its fresh flavor. It's not at all, I would not put dehydrated cilantro in here. If you put cilantro in here and you don't have freeze-dried, make sure it's fresh cilantro. You definitely would not want to use that much dried because you want a whole bunch of cilantro. If you don't like cilantro, go buy a bunch of, like 1 bunch of fresh, oh, I'm making a mess, parsley. And you could substitute parsley, because I know, I'm making a mess. Not everyone's favorite herb is cilantro. Tomorrow we'll taste it for seasonings. And then the way you serve this is I'm going to whip 1 block of cream cheese. You can buy whipped cream cheese if you want. It's just so much more expensive. And I was at Costco and bought a big pack of cream cheese. So I'm going to whip in my mixer 8 ounces of cream cheese for about 5 minutes until it gets light and fluffy. I'm going to spread that on a serving dish, and then I'm going to pour this salsa over the top of that, and then you eat it with crackers, whatever kind of crackers you want. You could use Ritz, Wheat Thins, whatever, and it is so delicious. So this is going to go in the fridge. I think my dog is in my oven. I think our potatoes are done. So let me put this away, and we're going to make some mashed potatoes. I'm going to make the mashed potatoes right in the crock pot because that's how I'm going to reheat these potatoes. So instead of making another dish dirty, we'll just do it right in here. If I can get them to fit. I didn't really take that into account. I think while I'm right here, I'm gonna go ahead and take our cheesecake out of the oven too, and I'm gonna let that just cool on the stove so I can shut my oven door. To season our potatoes, I'm gonna use a little bit of garlic salt. I'm gonna do more of just a traditional, I'm not gonna put Parmesan cheese or anything in these potatoes. Put a little bit of pepper, some garlic salt, a good amount of butter. Potatoes are one thing that reheat in the crock pot really, really well. And that way we'll save the oven space for something else, not for potatoes for reheating. I'm gonna add some more butter, a good amount of sour cream, probably that whole container, and some half and half. So we'll start with that, give everything a taste test, and then we will adjust the seasonings as needed. You can also put your stuffing in a crock pot. My mother-in-law usually does that as well. But I don't have two crock pots. I only own one crock pot. So I thought out of the two, it would be better to reheat the potatoes in the crock pot as opposed to reheating the stuffing. I always have dogs underfoot waiting for me to spill something because it is always inevitable. They are always going to get a little something when I'm in the kitchen. I'm going to go ahead and give these a taste test. I think we need a little bit to adjust the seasonings. We're on the right track. That is so good. I was just thinking, a lot of these, I'm doing these the day before, but you could do these a couple days before if you needed to. If you're busy, you know, take one day and do the stuffing. One day, do the potatoes. One day, do the desserts. You can even make pies and freeze them too if you wanted to make pies and freeze them. I have videos on that as well. I just added a little bit more butter. The beauty of if you want to have a homemade Thanksgiving, you don't have to do it all the day of. You can break it up, and potatoes freeze really well too, so you can even make these and freeze them. I'm gonna add a little bit more half and half. I need to get another one out. So there's so many different options we have in order to have a homemade Thanksgiving, but there's nothing wrong with going to Costco and picking up your stuffing too if you want to or need to. When we went shopping together, they had basically everything you would need to pull together a Thanksgiving. Even like my cranberry sauce, I canned that up last year. I made that last year, and now this year I don't have to make cranberry sauce. And one of my favorite sandwiches to have after Thanksgiving is a cranberry sauce sandwich where you put cranberry sauce, turkey, pesto, and some crunchy lettuce. The pesto and cranberry together, oh my goodness, it's so good. It sounds weird, but it's one of the best combinations I've ever had, with some cheddar cheese, sharp cheddar, not cream cheese. I don't like cranberry turkey sandwiches with cream cheese. So I'm gonna grab a different spoon and we're gonna taste this again. That's it. Wow, that is so, so good. Now we might need to add a little bit more milk to this tomorrow because it is gonna be in the fridge overnight. And then we also might put a couple pats, I'll put a couple pats of butter on the top so that that can melt, but I'll wait until I add a little bit more milk before we do that. This is so good. So good. I'm gonna put these dishes away. The dishwasher is basically full at this point, so I can go ahead and get it started. And then I'll be able to unload this dishwasher tonight so that tomorrow morning, or so that I will have an empty dishwasher because it's still relatively early in the day, even though it's so dark outside. It's only so dark outside because it's so blustery. So I'm gonna clean around the edge of my crock pot. The kitchen is still relatively clean. I mean, we did a good job picking up after ourselves as we were cooking. So we have our pumpkin cheesecake, and I'm going to run a knife along the outside. You can see how it didn't crack in the center. Cheesecakes are pretty notorious for cracking in the center. I never super stress about it if they crack in the center, but it is always a bonus if they don't. So now let's see if we can, woohoo! Wow, that looks beautiful. That looks absolutely beautiful. Yay! So here we have our cranberry salsa appetizer, our stuffing, our mashed potatoes, cranberry upside down cake, and our pumpkin cheesecake. We will need to make some whipped cream for the cranberry upside down cake and for the cheesecake. I might make one of those kind of cream cheese white, not frosting, but you know how sometimes when you have a cheesecake there's like that little cream cheese layer on the top? I might do that, I might not. We'll just have to see how I feel tomorrow. But for sure we will make some whipped cream to go on the top of these. Alrighty friends, it's the next day. And I took these mashed potatoes out of the refrigerator early this morning at about 7, and I put them in the crock pot on warm. When you have this many mashed potatoes, they do take quite a while, 4 to 5 hours to warm up. And you do want to check them, and if it needs a little bit more moisture, ooh, that's hot, go ahead and add a little bit more cream or milk, and that's what I'm doing here. We are heading out in about an hour, so this is about perfect. Everything is steamy and warm, and as soon as it's totally warm through, I'll put it on keep warm and put a couple dabs of butter on the top. And I do try to wipe the rim of the crock pots just so that that part doesn't kind of scorch and become really hard to clean later on. We're gonna go ahead and pack our bag. I'm gonna bring a quart of chicken broth in case our stuffing needs a little bit more broth. Cream cheese for the cranberry salsa. I could whip this, but I didn't feel like it, so we're just gonna have it like this. 2 different styles of crackers for our cranberry salsa in and of itself. And then the last few things we need are cranberry sauce, which I do need to put a ring on that before I put it in here so we don't spill it. Our upside down cranberry cake. I do need to wrap this so that it doesn't, you know, move around in the car. And then our stuffing. So by doing all that prep work yesterday, I was able to have a really, really relaxing morning this morning. I didn't have to rush or do any sort of big preparation to get this cooking together. I could just relax and enjoy the morning. It does, even though it is nowhere near Thanksgiving yet, we're pretty early in November, it does feel like the holidays today because it's not about the day you celebrate, it's about the traditions and getting together with family, and I'm excited to hang out with all of Josh's family today. We probably are gonna play a bunch of games, enjoy a bunch of really good food, and that is awesome. So I need to go get myself ready, and we are gonna go head out and enjoy a beautiful Thanksgiving. If you enjoyed this kind of Thanksgiving prep, I do have quite a few videos where my mom and I do some holiday prep together. I can put a playlist right here where you can go enjoy that. And I will be, if you're new, my mom and I are going to be filming a bunch of Thanksgiving and Christmas videos together where we're going to be making my side of the family's Christmas and Thanksgiving dinner. So if you're not subscribed and you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing so you don't miss out on anything. I hope you guys are having a fantastic holiday season, and I can't wait to see you next time. Bye, friend.